And well, to begin, I'd be lying to you if I said that Ayton has a really good trade market. I mean, a 27-year-old with prior and possibly current behavioral issues, commitment and effort issues, not to mention that he does have a player option next season, but is pretty much an expiring contract with not a whole lot of trade value. There's not a whole lot of teams that really want to trade for Deandre Ayton. In fact, I think there might only be one team that would actually value him through a trade, that team being the Indiana Pacers. I talked about this in a prior video. They're the only team that really has consistently over the past 2 or 3 years now tried to get Deandre Ayton. First back in 2022, offering him the max offer sheet when he was a restricted free agent, Phoenix eventually matching it, retaining him, and then eventually trading him to Portland buying him out of that contract, but that's the contract that initially came from the Pacers, offering that contract to Deandre Ayton. Not only that, but then after he got bought out by Portland, Indiana was one of the teams that tried to sign him. Along with the Lakers, Clippers, Knicks, a few other teams along with them, they were one of the teams that tried to get him. So with that in mind here, if the Lakers would put him on the trade block and put him up for a fairly decent price, I wouldn't be shocked if they would try to get him. Even with the possible expiring contract, even with the player option attached with him, if they're the only team that truly does value him at this point, I can't imagine they'd probably walk from their team. Yes, maybe opt out and work a new contract with them, but if the Lakers would trade him, I think the Indiana Pacers would probably be one of, if not the only team that would actually value him through a trade. So I think it's only right that we try to work with them through a trade. And well, they don't have a lot to offer at this point. Obviously, they're not going to offer Tyrese Haliburton, Pascal Siakam, Andrew Nembhard, even a guy like Aaron Nesmith. That's off the table for a guy like Ayton. But after that, maybe a young player that they couldn't work a contract with, this being Benedict Mathurin. I think this could be a possibility. Maybe not my favorite option and obviously not a center replacement for Deandre Ayton, but he probably would be on the table if we're looking to trade Deandre Ayton to them. Not only that, but maybe if we're trying to get a backup center, so we don't have the same problem as last year with only Jackson Hayes for our center rotation, maybe try to get Benedict Mathurin along with former Laker Jay Huff, offering something like Deandre Ayton, Dalton Connect with a small amount of draft compensation, maybe a second-round draft pick, maybe a future first-round draft pick swap for Benedict Mathurin and Jay Huff. Again, maybe not the best trade and definitely not a short-term trade, more of a long-term outlook here with Mathurin, who might be able to be a good fit with Luka, Austin, and the future of their team, then with Jay Huff to kind of be a stopgap for them, kind of like what he currently is for Indiana right now, playing roughly 15 minutes per game as either a starter or coming off the bench. You know, playing with Jackson Hayes maybe behind him or in front of him, that's probably what it would look like. But overall here, not a terrible trade package. Again, probably the only real trade package of value that we could get for Deandre Ayton. Getting a guy like Benedict Mathurin, a talented young player that, although yes is under an expiring contract and we would have to pay him to retain him, is a guy that could help their team going forward. Then with Jay Huff, who is a decent backup center, that's probably the most we could get for a package around Deandre Ayton. However, that would only be a 2-team trade. I have another idea that would include a third team that we are fairly familiar with, that team being the Brooklyn Nets. I mean, if we would then include them, we might be able to get a center that we want a bit more and that could help us a bit more too. This player being Day'Ron Sharpe, a player the Lakers have been linked to, a guy they apparently tried to sign in free agency, though they obviously ended up with Jake LaRavia, DeAndre Ayton off the buyout market, and Marcus Smart. But if they could get him, I definitely think they would be interested. Maybe a 3-team trade like Ayton going to Indiana once again, probably the only values him and would want him through a trade. Then with Benedict Mathurin instead going to the Brooklyn Nets, who probably would want him. A team that's in a rebuild and are trying to gather young talent, I think that would be a pretty good fit. Then with Day'Ron Sharpe going to the Lakers, maybe not the best center in the world, but a guy that could definitely be a good fit for the long term and the short term with their team. I've talked about him before. I kind of resemble him to a mini Andre Drummond. You know, not quite as big compared to Drummond, but not too far off from him. Day'Ron Sharpe being 6'10", 265 pounds, with a 7-foot plus wingspan. And yes, he does reflect the rebounding ability with Andre Drummond. Not quite up to Drummond, but not too far away from him. This season, for example, grabbing 5.9 rebounds in under 18 minutes per game, translating to over 12 of them per 36 minutes. On his career, grabbing nearly 14 per 36 minutes. Not only that, but is a big physical presence near the rim. Definitely knows how to take up space, is incredibly tough to move around the rim, is a very physical screener on the perimeter, He's a guy that wouldn't be a terrible fit, only is 24 years old to go along with it, just got a new contract in free agency, therefore he is not a restricted free agent, not a expiring contract, and does have a decent contract that would fit pretty well into their payroll. I think this could be a legitimate option for them that can actually work pretty well for all three parties, benefiting the Nets in their rebuild, benefiting the Pacers with the guy they wanted to get for a couple of years now, hopefully they would still want him. Then the Lakers getting Sharp, a younger center option that hopefully would be a better fit, and a guy that they themselves have tried to get for over a year now at this point too. I think it would make sense for all three parties. And again, I think that would probably be the most likely or probably the most realistic trade with a Deandre Ayton trade partner. That being the Indiana Pacers, a team that has tried to get him, probably would still have some minor interest in him, and would probably be one of, if not the only team that would value him through a trade. So that would definitely be trade partner number one, and the very first team that I would call up if I'm trying to trade Ayton, and if I'm probably going to get anything of value in return for him through a trade. But if not the Indiana Pacers, and if not trying to trade with them, then we're probably looking at trading Ayton as simply an expiring contract. Not getting anything of noteworthy value in return for him, probably not finding a team that wants him through a trade, or would value him very highly through a trade. At that point, we're simply using his contract to make the money work through a trade. If they're trying to trade him directly, if they're trying to find actual trade value for him, I think it's a very small market for him. Again, pointing to mainly the Indiana Pacers here, maybe a team like the Brooklyn Nets. Apart from that, I point to him as more of an expiring contract rather than a true trade asset that could get them value in return. But those are only my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. How do you feel about the Deandre Ayton trade market if the Lakers would in fact go that route? If they can't find common ground with him and get him back to where he once was earlier this season? How do you feel about trading him, and who would you then try to trade him for and trade him to? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But I think that'll pretty much do it for this one. And if you enjoyed the video, then I'll greatly appreciate it if you dropped a like, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit that notification bell to never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching, and have a great day or night.